At Riverside High School in Cedar Falls, Iowa, everyone knew Marcus Thompson as the quiet janitor who worked double shifts to keep the hallways spotless. What they didn't know was that his 17-year-old daughter, Emma, carried a secret that would shake the entire school to its core. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Emma Thompson had learned to become invisible at Riverside High. Every morning, she'd slip through the side entrance near the gymnasium, hoping to avoid the clusters of students who gathered around the main doors. Her worn sneakers made barely a sound against the polished linoleum floors that her father had buffed to perfection just hours before. The irony wasn't lost on her. While other kids complained about having to wake up at 7 for the first period, Emma was already familiar with every corner of the school by dawn. She'd spent countless mornings helping her father Marcus finish his cleaning rounds before classes began, organizing supplies in the janitor's closet and restocking paper towels in the bathrooms. "Just until we get back on our feet," Marcus would always say, his weathered hands gripping the mop handle as he spoke. "This job's temporary, sweetheart. Once I finish my night classes and get that accounting certification, things will be different." Emma never had the heart to tell him that she'd stopped believing in temporary 2 years ago, when they'd first moved to Cedar Falls after her mother's medical bills had drained their savings. She'd watched her father transform from a confident, small business owner to a man who apologized for his existence, speaking in hushed tones to avoid drawing attention to himself. The students at Riverside High had no such reservations about being noticed. Madison Sinclair ruled the junior class with an iron fist wrapped in designer clothing, her perfectly straightened blonde hair and manicured nails serving as weapons of social destruction. She'd identified Emma as prey within the first week of school. "Look who's wearing the same jeans again," Madison would whisper loudly enough for half the hallway to hear. "I think those are from the clearance rack at Walmart." How tragic. Her followers, Brittany Walsh and Chloe Martinez, would giggle on cue, their eyes scanning Emma from head to toe like predators evaluating wounded prey. Emma had learned to keep her head down, clutching her second-hand backpack tighter and quickening her pace toward her locker. The worst part wasn't the comments about her clothes, or the way they'd wrinkle their noses when she passed, as if poverty were contagious. The worst part was how they'd made her ashamed of her father. "Isn't that the janitor's kid?" Brittany had said one afternoon, loud enough for the entire cafeteria to hear. "I heard her dad emptied our trash cans. That's so gross." Emma had wanted to stand up and defend Marcus, to tell them about how he worked 16-hour days between his custodial job and his night classes, how he'd sacrificed everything to give her a chance at a better life. Instead, she'd pretended not to hear, taking her lunch to the library where she could eat in peace among the dusty books that never judged her. Worn-out shoes out the harassment escalated gradually, like a slow-burning fire that eventually consumed everything in its path. Madison discovered that Emma qualified for the free lunch program, and suddenly every meal became an opportunity for humiliation. "I can't believe they let charity cases eat the same food as paying students," Madison would announce, her voice dripping with disgust. "It's probably why the cafeteria food tastes so terrible. They have to make it cheap enough for the welfare kids." Emma's grades began to suffer as the constant stress wore her down. Her AP history teacher, Mrs. Patterson, noticed the change and approached her after class one day. "Emma, you're one of my brightest students," Mrs. Patterson said gently. "Your essay on the Great Depression was exceptional. But lately, you seem distracted. Is everything all right at home?" Emma wanted to confess everything. The sleepless nights worrying about her father, the daily gauntlet of insults she faced in the hallways, the way she'd started skipping lunch to avoid Madison's crew. Instead, she forced a smile and mumbled something about being tired. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning in October. Emma had arrived early to help her father replace the burned-out fluorescent bulbs in the main hallway. She was standing on a stepladder, carefully removing the old bulb, when Madison and her friends rounded the corner. "Oh my God," Madison shrieked, loud enough to wake the entire school. "The janitor's daughter is actually working as a janitor too. This is priceless." Brittany immediately pulled out her phone and started recording. "This is going straight to Instagram. Local loser follows in daddy's footsteps. The whole school needs to see this." Emma's hands trembled as she tried to continue her work, but the stepladder wobbled dangerously. The fluorescent bulb slipped from her fingers and shattered on the 5G floor, sending glass shards across the hallway. "Great job, Butterfinger," Chloe laughed. "Now Daddy's going to have to clean up your mess too. Talk about keeping it in the family." Marcus appeared around the corner, drawn by the commotion. Emma watched her father's face crumble as he took in the scene, his daughter standing on the ladder surrounded by broken glass, 3 girls with phones pointed at them, and students beginning to gather to see what was happening. "It's okay, sweetheart," Marcus said quietly, his voice barely audible above the growing crowd. "Accidents happen. Let me get the broom." "Actually, sir," Madison said with mock politeness, "I think your daughter needs to learn how to clean up after herself. Maybe she should get down there and pick up every piece of glass by hand, really earn her keep." The crowd had grown larger, and Emma could see other students recording with their phones. Her cheeks burned with shame as she realized this moment would be preserved forever, ready to be shared and reshared across social media. "That's enough," Marcus said, his voice gaining strength. "Emma, come down from there. I'll handle this." But Emma was frozen, paralyzed by humiliation and rage. She'd endured months of harassment, watching her father's dignity get chipped away piece by piece. Now they were attacking them both in front of half the school, treating them like entertainment. "You know what?" Madison continued, emboldened by the growing audience. "I think this is actually perfect. Like father, like daughter. Maybe cleaning toilets is genetic." The laughter that followed felt like a physical blow. Emma gripped the stepladder so tightly, her knuckles turned white, fighting back tears that threatened to spill over. She could see her father's hands shaking. As he knelt to pick up the glass, his shoulders hunched with defeat. What none of them knew, what Emma herself had only discovered by accident the week before, was that their principal, Dr. Rebecca Davis, had a family photo on her desk that included a younger version of Marcus Thompson. The same Marcus Thompson who'd been working double shifts to support his daughter, who'd been invisible to everyone at Riverside High, except when they needed someone to blame or mock. Dr. Davis wasn't just the principal. She was Marcus's older sister, and Emma was her niece. Emma climbed down from the stepladder with as much dignity as she could muster, her legs shaking from both fear and fury. The crowd of students had grown to nearly 30 people, all holding their phones like weapons, documenting her humiliation for posterity. "This is going viral," Brittany announced gleefully, already typing captions on her phone. "Poor little janitor girl following in Daddy's footsteps. This is comedy gold." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Marcus knelt silently, picking up the larger pieces of glass with his bare hands. Emma noticed a small cut on his thumb where a shard had sliced through his skin, but he didn't stop working. He never stopped working. "Dad, let me help," Emma started, but Madison cut her off. "Oh, this is so sweet," Madison cooed with fake sympathy. "Father-daughter bonding time in the hallway. Maybe we should start a GoFundMe for them. Help the Thompson family afford real jobs." The laughter that followed was cruel and sharp. Emma watched her father's face grow smaller, more defeated with each cruel word. She'd seen this transformation happen gradually over the past 2 years, but never so publicly, never with such vicious intent. "You know what I don't understand?" Chloe chimed in, stepping closer to get a better angle for her video. Why do they even let people like this into our school? I mean, Riverside High has standards. Well, technically, the janitor's kid has to go somewhere, Madison replied, as if Emma weren't standing right there. Though I heard she's on scholarship too. So basically, our parents' tuition money is paying for her education. We're literally funding her charity case. Emma felt something snap inside her chest. Not break, snap, like a rubber band stretched too far. She'd endured months of insults about her clothes, her lunch, her father's job. But hearing them reduce her academic achievements to charity felt like being slapped. I earned my grades, Emma said quietly, her voice barely audible above the chatter. What did you say? Madison turned toward her with theatrical surprise. Did the janitor's daughter just speak? This is unprecedented. I said I earned my grades, Emma repeated, louder this time. I have a 4.2 GPA. I'm ranked 7th in our class. I didn't get into a P classes because of charity. Madison's perfectly glossed lips curved into a cruel smile. Oh, honey. You think grades matter when you're still trailer trash? You think being smart changes the fact that your daddy scrubs our toilets? The crowd pressed closer, sensing drama. Emma could see teachers beginning to notice the commotion, but none of them intervened. They probably assumed it was just typical teenage social dynamics, not worth their time. At least I don't have to buy my friends, Emma shot back, surprising herself with her boldness. At least I don't need Daddy's credit card to have a personality. The crowd collectively inhaled. Someone whispered, "Oh snap," from the back. Madison's face flushed red beneath her foundation. Excuse me? Madison's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. Did you just insult me? You? The girl whose father literally cleans up after me? I insulted your character, Emma clarified, her fear dissolving into anger. Which apparently doesn't cost as much as your handbag. Brittany stepped forward, her phone still recording. You need to know your place, scholarship girl. Madison's family donates more money to this school in a year than your family will see in a lifetime. And my family works harder in a day than yours works in a year, Emma replied. But I guess that's the difference between earning something and having it handed to you. Marcus had stopped cleaning up the glass. He was staring at his daughter with a mixture of pride and terror, knowing that her defiance would only make things worse for both of them. You know what? Madison's voice had turned ice cold. I was going to let this slide, but now you've made it personal. You think you're better than us? You think your little grades and your attitude make you special? She pulled out her phone and opened Instagram, her fingers flying across the screen. Let's see how special you feel when everyone in Cedar Falls sees this video. Local janitor's daughter has a meltdown at school. I have 15,000 followers. Emma, by lunch, everyone in town will know exactly what kind of family you come from. Emma's newfound confidence cracked. She'd forgotten about social media, about how quickly humiliation could spread beyond the walls of Riverside High. Her father's night school classmates would see it. Her mother's former co-workers at the hospital would see it. Everyone would know. Please don't, Emma whispered, hating how small her voice sounded. Please don't post that. Oh, now you're begging? Madison's eyes lit up with malicious joy. That's more like it. But I think it's too late for you. She hit the share button with a theatrical flourish. There, done. Hope you're ready to be a famous janitor girl. The crowd began to disperse as teachers finally started paying attention. Emma stood frozen in the hallway, watching her classmates walk away while scrolling through their phones, probably already watching the video and sharing it with their friends. Marcus approached her carefully, the way someone might approach a wounded animal. Emma, sweetheart, let's get you to the nurse's office. You look pale. But Emma wasn't listening. She was thinking about the family photo she'd discovered in Principal Davis's office the week before, when she'd been sent there to deliver a message from her AP chemistry teacher. She'd been waiting outside the office when she'd noticed the framed picture on the desk. A family reunion photo with faces she almost recognized. It had taken her a moment to identify the younger version of her father, standing next to a woman who looked remarkably like him. The same dark eyes, the same stubborn jawline, the same way of holding their shoulders when they were trying to look confident. Principal Davis had returned to her office and caught Emma staring at the photo. "That's my family," she'd said warmly. "My brother Marcus and I at last year's reunion. Do you know him? He works here at the school." Emma had nodded mutely, not trusting herself to speak. She'd never known her father had a sister, let alone one who was the principal of her school. Marcus had always been evasive about his family, claiming they'd lost touch years ago. Now, standing in the hallway surrounded by broken glass and broken dignity, Emma understood why her father had never mentioned his sister. He was ashamed. Ashamed of his job, his circumstances, his inability to provide the life he'd once promised his daughter. But Principal Davis, Aunt Rebecca, Emma realized, had been watching everything. She'd been in her office, probably reviewing the morning announcements, when the commotion had started. Through her window, she would have seen the crowd gathering, seen her brother kneeling on the floor picking up glass, while students laughed and recorded. Emma looked up at the principal's office window and saw a figure standing there, motionless. Even from a distance, she could see the tension in the woman's posture, the way her hands were pressed against the glass. Dr. Rebecca Davis had just watched her brother and niece get humiliated by the students she was supposed to protect. And judging by the way she was gripping the window frame, she was not pleased. The intercom crackled to life just as the hallway began to empty. Dr. Rebecca Davis's voice echoed through the corridors, crisp and professional, but Emma detected an undercurrent of steel that she'd never heard before. "Madison Sinclair, Brittany Walsh, and Chloe Martinez, please report to the principal's office immediately. Mr. Thompson, please bring your daughter with you." Madison's confident smirk faltered for just a moment before she recovered her composure. "Whatever," she said loudly enough for the remaining students to hear. "Probably just wants to lecture us about bullying or something. Like that's going to stick." Emma watched her father's face drain of color. Being called to the principal's office while on duty was the kind of thing that could cost him his job, and they both knew he couldn't afford to lose this position. His night school tuition was due next month, and their rent was already 2 weeks late. "It's okay, Dad," Emma whispered as they walked toward the administrative wing. "I'll tell her it was my fault." "That's when I started the argument." Marcus shook his head firmly. "You don't take blame for defending yourself, sweetheart. Whatever happens, we face it together." The principal's office waiting area was small and cramped, with uncomfortable plastic chairs that seemed designed to make visitors feel unwelcome. Madison, Brittany, and Chloe sat clustered together, whispering and giggling as if they were waiting for a movie to start rather than facing disciplinary action. "I can't believe they're making such a big deal out of this," Brittany said, loud enough for Emma to hear. "It's not like we said anything that wasn't true." "My dad's going to be so annoyed when he has to leave work for this," Chloe added. "He's a lawyer, you know. He deals with real problems, not high school drama." Madison remained silent, but Emma noticed she kept checking her phone, probably watching the likes and comments pile up on her Instagram post. The video had been up for less than an hour, but Emma could already imagine it spreading through their small town like wildfire. The office door opened, and Dr. Davis stepped out. She was tall and imposing, with graying hair pulled back in a neat bun and glasses that made her dark eyes appear larger and more intense. Emma had always found her intimidating during their brief encounters in the hallways, but now she noticed something else in the principal's demeanor, a controlled fury that seemed to radiate from her like heat. "Girls," Dr. Davis said, her voice perfectly calm, "please come in. Mr. Thompson, I'll speak with you and Emma separately in a few minutes." The 3 bullies filed into the office with varying degrees of confidence. Madison held her head high, Brittany looked nervous, And Chloe kept glancing back at her phone, as if expecting her "allow your father to call and rescue her" dot through the thin office walls. Emma could hear muffled voices, Dr. Davis speaking in measured tones, followed by Madison's higher-pitched protests. The conversation lasted nearly 20 minutes, during which Emma watched her father pace the small waiting area like a caged animal. "I should have stopped them sooner," Marcus muttered, more to himself than to Emma. "I should have said something months ago when this started." "You couldn't have known it would get this bad," Emma replied, though she wondered if that was true. The harassment had been escalating for weeks, and Marcus had seen some of it firsthand during his cleaning rounds. The office door opened abruptly, and the three girls emerged looking distinctly less confident than when they'd entered. Madison's face was flushed, and Brittany appeared to have been crying. Chloe clutched her phone like a lifeline, her fingers shaking as she typed frantically. "Mr. Thompson, Emma, please come in," Dr. Davis said, stepping aside to let them pass. The principal's office was larger than Emma had expected, with tall windows that overlooked the school's courtyard and walls lined with certificates and awards. The family photo she'd noticed before sat prominently on the desk, and Emma found herself staring at it again, studying the resemblance between her father and the woman who now sat across from them. Dr. Davis settled behind her desk and folded her hands carefully. For a long moment, she simply looked at them, her expression unreadable. Emma felt like she was being examined under a microscope. "Marcus," Dr. Davis said finally, her voice softer than it had been in the hallway. "How long has this been going on?" Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "The teasing? A few months, I suppose. Kids will be kids, you know. Emma's stronger than she looks." "I'm not talking about teasing," Dr. Davis said sharply. "I'm talking about systematic harassment. I'm talking about students using social media to humiliate a member of our school community. I'm talking about behavior that crosses every line we have about respect and dignity." Emma watched her father shrink in his chair. "I didn't want to cause trouble," he said quietly. "Emma and I, we're used to keeping our heads down. Making waves doesn't help anyone." "Making waves," Dr. Davis repeated, her voice rising slightly. "Marcus, your daughter is being tormented by students who think their family's financial status gives them the right to treat others as subhuman. That's not making waves, that's demanding basic human decency." Something in her tone made Emma look up sharply. There was a personal anger in Dr. Davis's voice that went beyond professional concern. The way she said Marcus's name, the familiarity in her frustration, it sounded like an older sister scolding the younger brother. "Furthermore," Dr. Davis continued, "I've just informed Miss Sinclair and her friends that their behavior constitutes cyberbullying under our school's zero-tolerance policy. The video they posted has been reported to Instagram for harassment, and their parents are being called for an immediate conference." Madison's confident smirk from the hallway suddenly made more sense. She hadn't expected real consequences. In her world, money and social status provided immunity from accountability. "Dr. Davis," Marcus began, "I appreciate your concern, but I don't want Emma to become more of a target. Sometimes it's better to just what?" Dr. Davis interrupted, standing up abruptly. "To just accept that some people are worth more than others? To teach your daughter that she should be ashamed of honest work and academic achievement?" The room fell silent. Emma could hear the clock ticking on the wall and the distant sound of students changing classes in the hallway. Dr. Davis was breathing hard, as if she'd just run a marathon. "I'm sorry," the principal said, sitting back down and composing herself. "That was unprofessional. But Marcus, you have to understand, what happened in that hallway was not normal teenage conflict. It was calculated cruelty designed to make you both feel worthless." Emma found her voice. "Dr. Davis, can I ask you something?" The principal nodded. "That photo on your desk," Emma said, pointing to the family reunion picture, "is that really your brother?" Dr. Davis's expression softened slightly. Yes, it is. Then you're my aunt, Emma said simply. The words hung in the air like smoke. Marcus's face went white, and Emma could see his hands trembling in his lap. Dr. Davis looked between them, her professional mask finally slipping completely. You didn't tell her about me, she said to Marcus, and Emma could hear decades of hurt. In those 6 words, Marcus slumped forward in his chair, his shoulders sagging under the weight of 15 years of silence. Rebecca, don't, Dr. Davis said, holding up her hand. Don't explain, don't apologize. Just tell me why my niece had to discover our family connection by accident, instead of knowing her aunt worked in the same building where she goes to school every day. Emma looked between them. Pieces of a puzzle she'd never known existed suddenly clicking into place. The awkward silences when she'd asked about her father's family. The way Marcus had always changed the subject when she'd mentioned wanting to meet her grandparents, her aunts and uncles. You cut contact with your own sister? Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. It's complicated, sweetheart, Marcus said, but Dr. Davis cut him off. No, it's not complicated, it's pride. She stood up and walked to the window, her back to them. Your father was embarrassed that his older sister was more successful than he was. When his business failed and he had to take the janitorial position, he decided he'd rather disappear than accept help from family. That's not fair, Rebecca, Marcus said, finally showing some fire. You don't understand what it's like to go from being the family success story to being the one who needs charity. Charity? Dr. Davis whirled around, her eyes blazing. Is that what you think family support is? Charity? Emma felt like she was watching a tennis match, her head turning back and forth between them. But underneath the anger and hurt, she could see something else, love. The same stubborn protectiveness that made her father work double shifts was radiating from Dr. Davis as she defended her right to care about her brother. When Sarah got sick, Marcus said quietly, referring to Emma's mother, when the medical bills started piling up, I couldn't ask you for help. You'd just gotten promoted to principal. You had your own life, your own responsibilities. So instead you sold everything and moved to a town where you didn't know anyone, Dr. Davis said, her voice breaking slightly. You let your daughter grow up without knowing she had family who loved her. You let her think she was alone in the Keelam world. Emma's chest tightened. She'd never thought of it that way, but her aunt was right. She'd grown up feeling isolated, like it was just her and her father against the world. Meanwhile, there had been a family, an aunt who could have been part of her life, who could have helped carry the burden. I didn't want to be a disappointment, Marcus said, his voice so quiet Emma had to strain to hear him. I didn't want you to see me as a failure. You think working hard to support your daughter makes you a failure? Dr. Davis asked, returning to her desk. You think taking an honest job makes you worth less than your sister? I think losing everything I built makes me worth less, Marcus replied. And Emma heard the depth of his shame in those words. The room fell silent again. Emma could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the weight of years of family pain pressing down on all of them. But she also felt something else, anger. This is ridiculous, she said, standing up abruptly. Both adults looked at her in surprise. Emma. Marcus started, but she held up her hand the same way Dr. Davis had done. No, this is absolutely ridiculous. Do you know what I've been through these past few months? Do you know what it's like to eat lunch alone every day, because I'm too embarrassed to sit with other people? Do you know what it feels like to pretend I don't hear the whispers about my clothes and my free lunch status? Dr. Davis leaned forward, her expression concerned. Emma, I had no idea the harassment was so extensive. Why didn't you report it? Because I thought I was protecting Dad, Emma said, her voice rising. Because I thought if I caused trouble, it might affect his job. Because I've been trained my whole life to keep my head down and not make waves. Marcus looked stricken. Sweetheart, I never wanted. And all this time, Emma continued, All this time I've been dealing with this alone. I had an aunt who was literally the principal of my school. An aunt who could have helped, who could have stopped Madison and her friends months ago. But instead, I've been suffering because you were too proud to let your family know you needed support. The silence that followed was deafening. Emma could see tears in her father's eyes, and Dr. Davis was gripping the edge of her desk so tightly her knuckles were white. "You're right," Marcus said finally. "You're absolutely right. I let my pride hurt both of us. I let you suffer because I was too ashamed to ask for help." Dr. Davis reached across the desk and took her brother's hand. "Marcus, listen to me. When Mom and Dad died, you were the one who helped me through graduate school. You were the one who believed in me when I wanted to become an educator. You were never a failure. You were the most generous person I knew." "Until I wasn't," Marcus said. "Until I let my daughter face bullies alone, as I was too embarrassed to reach out to family." Emma sat back down, feeling drained. The adrenaline of her outburst was fading, replaced by a complex mix of emotions. She couldn't quite name: relief that the secret was out, anger that it had taken so long, sadness for all the lost time and connection. "So what happens now?" she asked. Dr. Davis pulled out a thick folder from her desk drawer. "Now we address the immediate problem. Madison Sinclair and her friends have violated multiple school policies. The video they posted contains footage of you and your father, without consent, filmed during a moment of distress. That's grounds for suspension at minimum." "And the social media post?" Emma asked. "Already being handled. I've contacted Instagram directly about the harassment, and I've been in touch with the parents." Mr. Sinclair, Madison's father, was not pleased to learn that his daughter had been cyberbullying another student. Apparently, he takes the family's reputation very seriously. Marcus looked worried. "Rebecca, I don't want to cause problems for wealthy families. That could come back to hurt Emma even more." "Let me worry about that," Dr. Davis said firmly. "I've been principal here for 8 years. I know how to handle entitled parents and their entitled children." Emma felt a spark of hope for the first time in months. "What about the other students, the ones who watched and recorded? Anyone who shared or commented on the original post will be dealt with according to our cyberbullying policy. This isn't going to be swept under the rug, Emma. Not on my watch." Dr. Davis stood up and walked around the desk to face them both. "But more importantly, we need to talk about our family, about how we move forward from here." She looked directly at Marcus. "I want to be part of Emma's life. I want to be the aunt I should have been all along. If you'll let me." Marcus's voice was thick with emotion. I'd like that very much." Emma felt tears stinging her eyes. After months of feeling invisible and alone, she was discovering that she'd never been as isolated as she'd thought. She had a family who was willing to fight for her, to protect her, to make sure she never had to face her problems alone again. "There's something else," Dr. Davis said, returning to her desk and pulling out another folder. "Emma, I've been reviewing your academic records. Your grades are exceptional, especially considering what you've been dealing with. I think you should consider applying for the state academic scholarship program." Emma blinked in surprise. "I didn't know I was eligible. With your GPA and your essay writing skills, you'd be a strong candidate. The scholarship covers full tuition at any state university, plus a stipend for living expenses." Marcus looked stunned. "Rebecca, that's more than I ever dreamed of for her." "She earned it," Dr. Davis said simply. "She earned it through her hard work and determination, despite everything she's been facing. Now it's time to make sure she gets the opportunity she deserves." Emma felt the weight of possibility settling on her shoulders. College had always seemed like a distant dream, something that happened to other people's children. Now it felt real, tangible, within reach. "But first," Dr. Davis said, her voice taking on the authoritative tone Emma recognized from school assemblies. "We need to address the immediate situation with Madison and her friends. And I have a feeling they're not going to like what comes next." The next morning, Emma walked through the main entrance of Riverside High for the first time in months. She held her head high, her worn backpack slung over her shoulder with newfound confidence. The night before, Dr. Davis had called personally to inform her that Madison Sinclair and her friends would be serving a 3-day suspension, effective immediately. Word had spread quickly through the small town. Emma's phone had buzzed all evening with messages from classmates she barely knew, some apologetic, others curious about the drama that had unfolded. The Instagram video had been removed, and several students who had shared it received official warnings from the school administration. As Emma approached her locker, she noticed something different. Students were looking at her, but not with the mixture of pity and disdain she'd grown accustomed to. Instead, she saw curiosity, respect, and in some cases, admiration. News of her connection to Principal Davis had reached the student body. But more importantly, so had the story of how she'd stood up to the school's most notorious bullies. "Emma," a voice called from behind her. She turned to see Jake Morrison, a quiet kid from her AP chemistry class, hurrying to catch up with her. "Hey, I just wanted to say that what Madison did to you was completely messed up. I should have said something before." Emma was surprised by his directness. Jake had never spoken to her beyond asking to borrow a pencil or comparing homework answers. "Thanks, Jake. That means a lot." "Actually," he continued, fidgeting with his backpack straps, "a bunch of us were talking, and we want to know if you'd like to sit with us at lunch today. I know you usually eat in the library, but, well, you shouldn't have to hide anymore." The invitation caught Emma off guard. She'd spent so many months eating alone that the thought of sitting with a group felt almost foreign. "I'd like that," she said, and meant it. As Jake walked away, Emma realized that Madison's video had accomplished something its creator never intended. Instead of cementing Emma's status as an outcast, it had exposed the cruelty that many students had witnessed but never challenged. The tide was turning. Her first period class was a P history with Mrs. Patterson, who smiled warmly when Emma entered the room. "Emma, I'm glad to see you looking well. I heard there was some unpleasantness yesterday." "It's been resolved," Emma replied, taking her usual seat in the middle of the room. She noticed that several classmates turned to nod at her acknowledgments she'd never received before. Mrs. Patterson began the lesson on post-World War II economic recovery, but Emma found her mind wandering to the conversation she'd had with her father the night before. They'd stayed up until nearly midnight, talking about everything: her mother's illness, the financial struggles, the shame Marcus had carried, and the family connections Emma had never known existed. "Your Aunt Rebecca called after you went to bed," Marcus had told her over breakfast that morning. "She wants to have dinner with us this weekend. She says she has 15 years of catching up to do." The idea of having extended family still felt surreal to Emma. She'd grown up thinking it was just her and her father, creating their own small unit against the world. Now she was discovering aunts, cousins, and a whole network of relationships that had been severed by pride and miscommunication. The morning passed quietly until third period, when Dr. Davis's voice crackled over the intercom system. "Students and faculty, please give me your attention for an important announcement." The classroom fell silent. Everyone knew that unscheduled announcements usually meant either emergencies or significant disciplinary actions. Yesterday, our school community witnessed an incident that violated our core values of respect, kindness, and inclusivity. Several students engaged in behavior that constituted cyberbullying and harassment of a fellow student. This behavior is unacceptable and will not be tolerated at Riverside High. Emma felt every eye in the room turn toward her. Her cheeks burned, but she kept her gaze fixed on Mrs. Patterson, who offered an encouraging nod. Effective immediately, we are implementing a comprehensive anti-bullying initiative. Any student found engaging in harassment, whether in person or online, will face serious consequences including suspension and potential expulsion. We are also establishing an anonymous reporting system for students who witness bullying behavior. Dr. Davis paused, and Emma could hear the weight of authority in her voice when she continued. Let me be absolutely clear. At Riverside High, we judge students by their character, their effort, and their contribution to our community. We do not judge them by their family's financial status, their parents' occupation, or their need for academic or financial assistance. Every student deserves to learn in an environment free from harassment and discrimination. The intercom clicked off, leaving the classroom in stunned silence. Emma realized that her aunt hadn't just addressed the immediate problem, she'd used the incident to establish new policies that would protect other students in similar situations. At lunch, Emma made her way to the cafeteria with nervous excitement. She spotted Jake's table near the windows, where he sat with 5 other students she recognized from various AP classes. As she approached, they looked up with welcoming smiles. Emma, perfect timing, said Sarah Chun, a girl from her AP English class. We were just talking about the chemistry exam next week. Jake says you're basically a genius at balancing equations. Emma felt a warm flush of pleasure at being recognized for her academic abilities rather than her family circumstances. I wouldn't say genius, but I can help if you want to study together. As she settled into the group, Emma noticed that other students were watching her table with interest. Some looked approving, others seemed curious about the social dynamics that were shifting before their eyes. The girl who had been invisible for months was suddenly very visible indeed. "Can I ask you something?" said Tyler Brooks, a basketball player who Emma had never expected to acknowledge her existence. "Is it true that you're related to Principal Davis?" Emma nodded, still getting used to this new reality. "She's my aunt. We reconnected recently." "That's so cool," said Maria Santos, another girl from AP English. "I always thought Dr. Davis was intimidating, but she seems really protective of students. Yesterday's announcement was pretty intense." "She is protective," Emma agreed, thinking about the fierce love she'd seen in her aunt's eyes. She believes everyone deserves to be treated with dignity. The conversation flowed naturally from there, covering everything from upcoming exams to college application deadlines to weekend plans. Emma found herself laughing at Tyler's jokes and offering to help Sarah with her chemistry homework. For the first time in months, she felt like she belonged somewhere. As lunch period was ending, she noticed a commotion near the entrance to the cafeteria. Madison Sinclair had arrived to clean out her locker before beginning her suspension. Her usual entourage was notably absent. Brittany and Chloe were also suspended, and she looked smaller somehow, diminished without her audience. Madison's eyes swept the cafeteria and landed on Emma's table. For a moment, their gazes locked across the room. Emma expected to feel the familiar knot of anxiety in her stomach, the urge to look away and disappear. Instead, she felt calm, grounded by the support of her new friends and the knowledge that she was no longer facing her problems alone. Madison looked away first, her shoulders slumping as she realized that her power in the school's social hierarchy had evaporated overnight. The girl who had ruled through fear and humiliation was now facing the consequences of her actions, while the target of her cruelty was surrounded by genuine friends and family support. As Emma gathered her things to head to her next class, Tyler spoke up. "You know, Emma, I owe you an apology. I saw what Madison was doing to you, and I never said anything." "That was cowardly of me. We all saw it," Sarah added. "We all knew it was wrong, but we were too worried about becoming targets ourselves. You shouldn't have had to face that alone." Emma felt a surge of forgiveness mixed with sadness for all the lost time, all the lonely lunches and silent hallways. "Thank you for saying that. It means more than you know." As she walked to her afternoon classes, Emma reflected on how dramatically her life had changed in just 24 hours. She had family she'd never known about, friends who valued her for her mind and character, and a future that suddenly seemed bright with possibility. The scholarship application her aunt had given her was tucked carefully in her backpack, along with information about advanced placement credits and early admission programs. For the first time since her mother's death, Emma allowed herself to dream big. That evening, as she helped her father prepare dinner in their small apartment, Marcus looked up from the stove with tears in his eyes. "I'm proud of you, sweetheart," he said quietly. "Not just for standing up to those bullies, but for being strong enough to forgive your old man for his mistakes." Emma hugged him tightly, breathing in the familiar scent of his aftershave and the lingering smell of industrial cleaner that always clung to his clothes. "We're going to be okay, Dad. All of us. We're going to be better than okay." And for the first time in years, Emma truly believed it. 3 weeks later, Emma stood in front of her bedroom mirror, adjusting the collar of a new blouse her Aunt Rebecca had insisted on buying for her college interview. The scholarship application had been submitted, and today she would meet with representatives from the state university system who were visiting Riverside High to interview prospective candidates. Apartment felt different now. Gone was the oppressive silence that had once filled their small home. Marcus had started bringing Rebecca over for dinner twice a week, and their conversation stretched late into the evening as siblings caught up on 15 years of lost time. Emma had learned that she had 3 cousins living in different states, all of whom were excited to finally meet their long-lost family member. "You ready for this, college girl?" Marcus called from the kitchen, where he was packing her lunch with extra care. The pride in his voice was unmistakable. "As ready as I'll ever be," Emma replied, though her stomach was churning with nervous energy. The interview would determine whether she received the full scholarship that could change the trajectory of her entire life. At school, the atmosphere had shifted dramatically. The anonymous reporting system Dr. Davis had implemented was working, with several incidents of bullying being addressed before they could escalate. More importantly, the culture itself was changing. Students who had once been bystanders were now speaking up when they witnessed harassment. Emma's friend group had expanded beyond Jake's lunch table. She now tutored struggling students in chemistry and mathematics, had joined the debate team, and was considering running for student government. The girl who had once hidden in the library now participated fully in school life. "Emma Thompson, to the main office, please," came the announcement during her morning AP literature class. This time, the summons didn't fill her with dread. Instead, she felt a flutter of excitement. Dr. Davis was waiting in the hallway outside her office, along with 2 professionally dressed adults Emma didn't recognize. "Emma, I'd like you to meet Dr. Patricia Williams from the State Scholarship Committee and Mr. David Chun from the University Admissions Office." Emma shook hands with both visitors, remembering her aunt's coaching about maintaining eye contact and speaking clearly. "It's a pleasure to meet you both." "The pleasure is ours," Dr. Williams said with a warm smile. "We've heard remarkable things about your academic achievements and your resilience in the face of adversity." The interview took place in the school's conference room, a space Emma had never entered before. As she settled into the chair across from the committee members, she thought about how different this moment felt from the humiliation she'd experienced in these same hallways just weeks before. "Tell us about your academic goals," Mr. Chun began, his pen poised over a notepad. Emma took a deep breath and began to speak about her passion for biochemistry, her interest in medical research, and her dream of developing treatments for diseases like the one that had claimed her mother. As she talked, she noticed both interviewers leaning forward, genuinely engaged with her responses. "Your essay about overcoming economic hardship was particularly moving," Dr. Williams noted. "Can you elaborate on how your experiences have shaped your educational priorities?" For a moment, Emma hesitated. Months ago, She would have been mortified to discuss her family's financial struggles with strangers. Now she understood that her story wasn't something to be ashamed of. It was evidence of her strength and determination. "My father works 2 jobs to support our family and pay for his own education," Emma said proudly. "Watching him sacrifice. His comfort for my future taught me that education isn't just about personal advancement. It's about lifting up the people you love. I want to use my education to create opportunities for others who come from similar backgrounds." The interview continued for 45 minutes, covering everything from her favorite authors to her thoughts on scientific ethics to her plans for community service. By the time it ended, Emma felt confident that she'd represented herself well. "We'll be in touch within 2 weeks," Mr. Chun said as they shook hands goodbye. "Thank you for a fascinating conversation, Emma. Your passion for learning is evident." As the visitors left, Dr. Davis pulled Emma aside. "How do you think it went?"
"Better
"Than I expected," Emma admitted. "I felt like they really listened to what I had to say." "They did more than listen," her aunt said with a knowing smile. "But I'll let them deliver their own verdict." That afternoon, Emma was walking to her locker when she noticed Madison Sinclair approaching from the opposite direction. The girl who had once terrorized her looked different, smaller, less sure of herself. Her suspension had ended the week before, but her return to school had been notably subdued. They reached the locker bay at the same time, creating an awkward moment of proximity. Emma braced herself for a confrontation, but Madison surprised her. "Emma," Madison said quietly, glancing around to make sure they weren't being overheard. Can I talk to you for a minute?" Emma studied her former tormentor's face, looking for signs of deception or malice. Instead, she saw something she'd never expected to find there: genuine remorse. "Okay," Emma said cautiously. Madison fidgeted with her expensive handbag, clearly struggling with whatever she wanted to say. "I know this is probably too little. Too late, but I wanted to apologize for everything. The things I said, the video, all of it." Emma waited, unsure how to respond to this unexpected development. "My dad made me think about what I did," Madison continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "He told me that if I ever behaved like that again, he'd send me to boarding school. But more than that, he made me understand how cruel I was being, how I was treating you like you were less than human." The apology hung in the air between them. Emma could see that Madison was struggling, that this admission was costing her something significant. Part of Emma wanted to reject the apology, to remind Madison of all the lonely lunches and humiliating moments she'd endured. But a larger part of her recognized the courage it took to admit wrongdoing. "Thank you for saying that," Emma said finally. "It means something that you recognize the impact of your actions." Madison nodded, tears forming in her eyes. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed you to know that I understand how wrong I was, and that I'm trying to be better." As Madison walked away, Emma felt a complex mix of emotions. The apology didn't erase months of harassment, but it did provide a sense of closure she hadn't realized she needed. More importantly, it confirmed what she'd come to understand about people, that they were capable of growth and change, even when they'd caused significant hurt. That evening, the Thompson family gathered around their small dining table for a dinner that had become a weekly tradition. Rebecca had brought homemade lasagna and stories from her own college years, while Marcus shared updates from his accounting classes. "I have some news," Rebecca announced as they finished eating. "The school board has approved a new program. I proposed academic mentoring for students from economically disadvantaged backgrounds. We'll be pairing high-achieving students with college graduates who can help them navigate the application process and transition to higher education." Emma looked up with interest. "That sounds amazing. Who's going to run it?" "Well," Rebecca said with a smile, "I was hoping you might be interested in being our first student coordinator. Once you get to college, of course, but during your senior year, you could help identify students who would benefit from the program. The offer was both flattering and meaningful. Emma would have the opportunity to help other students avoid the isolation and struggle she'd experienced. "I'd love to do that," she said without hesitation. Marcus reached across the table and squeezed his daughter's hand. "Your mother would be so proud of the woman you're becoming," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Emma squeezed back, feeling the weight of possibility settling around her like a warm blanket. The scholarship interview had gone well. Her family was stronger than ever, and she had the chance to make a real difference in other students' lives. 2 days later, Emma was in a P chemistry when Dr. Davis appeared at the classroom door with an envelope in her hand. Their eyes met through the glass, and Emma saw her aunt's barely contained excitement. "Emma Thompson," her teacher called. "You're needed in the office." As Emma gathered her books, her classmates erupted in whispers. Everyone knew what an official envelope from the principal's office might contain, especially so soon after the scholarship interviews died in the hallway. Rebecca couldn't contain her smile any longer. "Open it," she said, holding out the thick envelope. With the university seal, Emma's hands trembled as she tore open the envelope and unfolded the letter inside. The words seemed to swim on the page until one phrase leaped out at her. "We are pleased to inform you that you have been selected as a recipient of the full academic scholarship." "I got it," Emma whispered, hardly believing the words. "Aunt Rebecca, I got the scholarship." Rebecca pulled her into a fierce hug, both of them crying and laughing at the same time. "You earned it, sweetheart. Every bit of it." As they stood in the hallway where Emma had once been humiliated and broken, she marveled at how completely her life had transformed. The girl who had been ashamed of her father's work was now proud of her family's resilience. The student who had eaten alone was now surrounded by genuine friends. The teenager who had felt hopeless about her future now held a golden ticket to the college education of her dreams. Most importantly, she had learned that her worth wasn't determined by her family's financial status or her father's job title. It was determined by her character, her effort, and her refusal to let circumstances define her potential. The scholarship was just the beginning of Emma Thompson's journey, but it represented something much larger than educational opportunity. It represented the triumph of dignity over humiliation, of family love over social status, and of hope over despair. 6 months later, Emma stood at the podium in Riverside High's packed auditorium, looking out at the sea of faces that had once seemed so intimidating. As the graduating class valedictorian, she had the honor of delivering the commencement address, a privilege that still felt surreal. The journey to this moment had been extraordinary. After receiving the scholarship, Emma had thrown herself into her remaining months at Riverside High with renewed purpose. She'd launched the peer mentoring program with her aunt's support, personally working with 12 underclassmen who faced similar challenges to what she'd experienced. 3 of them had already received preliminary scholarship offers from various colleges. "Fellow graduates, faculty, families, and friends," Emma began, her voice carrying clearly through the microphone. "When I started high school, I thought success meant becoming invisible. I thought if I could just stay quiet enough, small enough, unnoticed enough, I might survive these 4 years without incident." In the audience, she could see her father in the front row, wearing his best suit and beaming with pride. Beside him sat Rebecca, who had become not just an aunt, but a true mentor and friend. Behind them, Emma spotted Jake, Sarah, Tyler, and the rest of her friend group, all of whom had helped her transform from an isolated outcast into a confident leader. "I learned that invisibility isn't survival, it's surrender," Emma continued. "And I learned that our worth isn't determined by our family's bank account, our parents' job title, or our zip code. It's determined by how we treat others, how we respond to adversity, and how we use our struggles to build empathy and strength." The speech had taken weeks to write, with Emma carefully crafting each word to honor her journey while inspiring. her classmates. She wanted to acknowledge the pain she'd experienced without dwelling on it, to celebrate her achievements without boasting, and to offer hope to any student who might be facing similar challenges. Some of you know that my path here wasn't easy, she said, making brief eye contact with Madison, who sat 3 rows back with her own family. I faced harassment and cruelty that made me question my worth and my place in this community. But I also discovered something powerful, that when good people choose to act with courage and kindness, they can change everything. The mentoring program Emma had established had already made a significant impact. 2 students who had been struggling with bullying had found their voices and advocates. A girl whose family had recently lost their home was now connected with resources and support. A boy whose learning disability had made him a target for ridicule was thriving with proper accommodations and peer tutoring. To my fellow graduates, I challenge you to remember that success without compassion is hollow, Emma said, warming to her theme. Whether you're heading to college, entering the workforce, or taking a gap year to find your path, remember that you have the power to lift others up or tear them down. Choose to lift. As she spoke, Emma thought about the conversation she'd had with Madison just 2 weeks earlier. The former queen bee had approached her after a student government meeting, where Emma had successfully advocated for expanded financial aid information to be included in college preparation materials. I wanted you to know, Madison had said, that I've been volunteering at the middle school, working with kids who are being bullied. My therapist suggested it might help me understand the impact of my actions. She was right. Emma had been genuinely surprised by Madison's transformation. The girl who had once ruled through intimidation was now using her natural leadership abilities to protect vulnerable students. It wasn't enough to undo the damage she'd caused, but it represented genuine growth and accountability. I want to thank the educators who saw potential in all of us, even when we couldn't see it in ourselves. Emma continued, looking directly at Mrs. Patterson, her AP history teacher who had been the first to notice her struggles. And I want to thank the family members who supported us, believed in us, and sometimes had to forgive us for losing our way. The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. Emma could see some parents wiping tears from their eyes, and several of her classmates were clearly emotional. This was the moment she'd been building toward, the message that would tie everything together. Most importantly, I want to speak to any student in our district who might be watching this and wondering if their circumstances will forever define their opportunities, Emma said, her voice growing stronger. I want you to know that your story isn't over. Your current chapter doesn't determine your ending. With hard work, support from good people, and the courage to believe in yourself, you can write any future you choose. Emma paused, thinking about the full-ride scholarship that would take her to the State University's honors program in biochemistry. She thought about the research opportunities that awaited her, the pre-med track she'd mapped out, and the dream of medical school that no longer seemed impossible. But more than that, she thought about the responsibility that came with these opportunities. The scholarship I received isn't just an individual achievement, she said. It represents the hopes of everyone who believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. It carries the responsibility to use my education not just for personal advancement, but to create opportunities for others who face similar challenges. As she neared the end of her speech, Emma reflected on how much had changed since that terrible morning, when she'd stood on a stepladder surrounded by broken glass and cruel laughter. The girl who had once been ashamed of her father's work now spoke proudly about the dignity of honest labor and the importance of supporting working families. In closing, I want to share something my father taught me, Emma said, her voice thick with emotion. He taught me that no job is beneath your dignity if you're doing it to support the people you love. He taught me that education is a privilege that should be treasured, not taken for granted. And he taught me that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is ask for help when you need it. The applause that followed was thunderous, with many audience members rising to their feet. Emma could see her father openly crying, and Rebecca was applauding so enthusiastically that several people around her were smiling at her obvious pride. As Emma stepped down from the podium and returned to her seat among her classmates, she felt a profound sense of completion. The scared, isolated girl who had entered Riverside High 4 years ago had grown into a confident young woman ready to take on the world. The ceremony continued with the presentation of diplomas. When Emma's name was called as recipient of the Presidential Academic Achievement Award, the applause was even louder than before. She walked across the stage with her head held high, accepting her diploma from Dr. Davis, who whispered, "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart," as they embraced. After the ceremony, Emma was surrounded by well-wishers and fellow graduates taking photos. Jake announced that he'd been accepted to the engineering program at the same university Emma would attend, while Sarah had received a scholarship to study journalism at the state capitol. Their friend group, forged in the aftermath of adversity, would remain connected even as they pursued different paths. Marcus approached with tears still streaming down his face. "I love you so much, sweetheart," he said, pulling her into a fierce hug. "Your mother would be so incredibly proud of the woman you've become." "I love you too, Dad," Emma replied, holding him tight. "Thank you for never giving up, even when things got really hard." Rebecca joined them, completing their small family circle. "Ready for the celebration dinner?" she asked. "I made reservations at that Italian place you love." As they walked toward the parking lot, Emma looked back at Riverside High one last time. The building that had once felt like a prison now seemed like the launching pad for everything she would become. She'd learned within these walls that adversity could be transformed into strength, that isolation could give way to genuine connection, and that the most important victories were often the ones fought on behalf of others. 3 months later, Emma would begin her freshman year as a pre-med student on a full academic scholarship. She would excel in her studies while continuing to advocate for first-generation college students. She would eventually become Dr. Emma Thompson, specializing in pediatric oncology, driven by the memory of her mother and dedicated to serving families facing medical crisis. But the foundation for all of that future success was built in the hallways of Riverside High, where a janitor's daughter learned that her worth was immeasurable, her potential unlimited, and her story far from over. As the Thompson family drove away from the school, Emma rolled down her window and felt the warm spring air on her face. Ahead lay college, medical school, and a career dedicated to healing and helping others. Behind lay the struggles and triumphs that had shaped her into someone capable of achieving those dreams. The girl who had once believed she needed to be invisible had become impossible to ignore, not because of wealth or status, but because of character, compassion, and an unshakable belief that everyone deserves dignity and opportunity. And in the end, that made all the difference. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.